riot on us of negatively focused words.
Sure.
And so we're going to get a preponderance of those in our system, and we recognize this, and this is what we mean when we say that our system is predisposed to picking up extreme language, and thus our interpretations are based on extreme sets of language, not a more normal or common set of language. So if we were looking at a pastoral village, for instance, in Italy, that made cheese and raised goats for goat hair vests, their normal state of language would not necessarily be extreme, and we'd be able to interpret it, if, assuming there was enough mass, etc., of linguistics.
Right.
We'd get a different set of results from them, I'm sure.
Right.
But living in the media-dominated world, we have to acknowledge that there's a deliberate use of fear-based language in emotionally connected context to attempt to drive social norms or the global consensus, if you will. So our hints of positive developments are at this stage a little bit out there in terms of about 6 or 8 years out, and they're a little bit more vague in the sense of there at least will be a resurgence, if you will, a renaissance that will take over the North American continent. Whether we continue to call ourselves the United States of America or not is immaterial. The populace here will go through some kind of a renaissance beginning in about 6 years from now that will lead the planet in what we're calling the new electrics. And this is an entirely new technology beyond anything that we can even conceptualize now, because it's in our future. And it's kind of like we're presented a fuzzy picture of an electric train to a caveman, ask him to sketch it, and he can at best get just the general shape of things. And that's kind of where we're at with this, because apparently there's going to be some kind of a breakthrough technology over these next 6 or 8 years that is so fundamental that the words at the moment don't exist to adequately describe it in our current context. Boy, I hope that was clear.
It's okay if I... Well, here's one thing that's very interesting. I mean, we know that with the Hadron Collider,
correct.
They're going to be... I know that they had some problems, that they kind of set them back with some of their magnets and so on and so forth. So they're going to be firing that thing up again. They just did one single test, but one of the most exciting things for me, anyway, the immediate things from the LHC was the grid. The guys that invented and developed and put into place the Internet developed the grid, which makes the Internet, even with our fastest connections, T1s or what have you, look like slow dial-up. I mean, it's like instantaneous information, which hopefully will start being utilized in the private sector soon. Now, it makes... And
that could indeed be part of what we're seeing as a basic core technology, the idea of this molecular entrainment, where object A in Paris instantly vibrates with whatever object B is doing in New York, that kind of thing.
Yes. It's very fascinating. And one other thing, to kind of go back to the instinct level, I recently saw a documentary. It was called Search for Adam, and they made a very interesting discovery that they could take and do a DNA swab or just a regular swab and run it through DNA analysis, and they could look at the chromosomes in the DNA, and they could see that to trace back all the way back to one single person, there's like a mutation that happens within humans. And so everyone with this specific little mutation in their genes, they determined were all related because it all came from one father. You know, it all kind of branches out like branches of a tree. So the scientist, he went to Mongolia, as a matter of fact, and he did a little test, and he found several people in the United States that were all related, but they didn't know each other, all because of this little mutation that he found in their DNA, which led to a discussion here on the program about having these little psychic blinks or being in tune with certain people, you know, maybe something instilled in our DNA that we resonate on the same frequency even. It's all up for of course, you know, speculation and just throwing ideas out there, but it makes sense.
It's not necessarily invalid.
Yes.
It's just a different way of conceiving how DNA chooses to organize itself. And if we acknowledge that, for instance, the universe is not little rocks in terms of atoms whizzing around in space, but in fact is the illusion of atoms created by energetic collisions of various different kinds of energy, creating, if you will, vast quantities of ripples into a pond until the ripples take over our whole perception and form the universe in front of our face,
Yes.
then who's to say, in fact, that we don't exist as Kurt Vonnegut thought in terms of like grand falloons, where you would have these particular connections to people all around the planet that you might never meet, but you're tied together both at a karmic level, but perhaps even at a super organism level.
Right.
And that you, as existing as a human, might be merely one very complex sensory organ, if you will, for a grander, larger being. There's no reason that the universe couldn't organize itself that way.
Yes, indeed. Fascinating stuff. All right, we're at the top of the hour. Going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll open up the phone lines completely. 312-239-8902. That's... We're going to get Clif back in here. Clif, welcome back.
Yep.
All right, let's see what we got here. We're going to go right to the phone lines here and see who we've got in there in the mix of things. So let's see here. Let's get them on the air. All right, caller, you're on. Your name, where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Derek from Minnesota. Just wish all the encouragement of the universe to both of you. You're both doing a great job at what you do. My observation, and I'd like to comment on this, it seems like the dominator society that is pretty much in its dying gasps right now, they rely on fear to control us, and and they've even made the most natural thing in the world, which we call death, the boogeyman. And we are here within the context of eternity. We're here a blink. I mean, we are in the blink right now. And they make this fear of death. If you listen to our news, the whole culture is like, oh, so many died in a plane wreck, and so many died in this war. And they just make this thing called death, which is merely transition into a new state, they make it the boogeyman. And hopefully humanity is going to wake up that you're just eternal creatures, eternal spirits having a very brief experience and meet in this human body, but it's a blink. And that's what keeps me from going crazy, because I see some calamity down the line. But, looking at the big picture, which is what I need to do to stay sane and to be relatively fear-free, is that this is just one small, tiny, infinitesimal chapter in the greater aspect of existence. So I'd like to hear a comment on that.
That kind of basically is our assumption as well, that the powers that be are definitely into control mode. They're facing a desperate time, and their ability to ratchet up the fear is rather evident. They've been really working it since 2000 very blatantly. Prior to that, it was a little bit more subtle, but nonetheless existent and active at least since the mid-40s. And obviously they're driven to a certain extent by their own fear. We capture some of that in their language. And these are people that are very afraid of death, whereas, and to a certain extent are projecting it or attempting to project it out on the rest of the planet. Because bear in mind, when they die, they lose their power. Whereas if you don't have power, it's not a big deal. It's one less thing to worry about, if you will, right? So we all die. Well, yeah, that's fine. At least I don't have to worry about surrendering all these things that I'm tied to by attachment. And at an underlying level, we see that meme all the time. The be afraid meme, and it just focuses in many different ways. But a more now blatant aspect of it is the constant urge from media since maybe the last 100 years towards attachment. Attach your ego to this, buy that, define yourself this way. Constantly these messages are pouring out on us, and they have an impact on the ego, forming the ego into basically an attachment machine. And if you go and look at the previous history of humanity, the whole pathway to liberation is to become unattached to things and concentrate on exposing yourself to your own consciousness and really observing reality and not getting hung up on these abstractions and illusions. Unfortunately, the current monetary system is just such one of those abstractions and illusions taken to a huge level, and it's going to crash around our ears. It's really simple, though. the concept of existing or taking a positive message from this rather bleak forecast. And it's kind of like, let's use a metaphor first and then apply it. And the metaphor is that you're standing on a karate mat or a judo mat, and the opponent or your partner in this exercise is down on their side because you've just thrown them down. What they're going to do is they're going to try and kick your foot out from underneath you and throw you off balance. And the solution to it, of course, is to just lift up your feet as their foot passes underneath and then put it back down, and you're fine. And all their energy has been wasted. And at the moment, what we're seeing is an attempt to sort of kick our feet out from underneath us by getting us focused on this horrific problem with the economy. And you notice that of course, it's sort of, quote, natural that the media would focus on it, but nonetheless, they're directing our attention deliberately